Hey everybody, welcome to Always Bored Never Boring. Today's video is sponsored by Archon Studio, who are currently running a Kickstarter campaign for World of Deuslair, a D&D 5th edition compatible campaign setting which is expanding on their Dungeons & Lasers range with over 400 miniatures, a campaign book and a bestiary. The campaign launched on the 11th of April and funded in minutes, and backers have since been unlocking stretch goals and super stretch goals at an amazing rate. By the time you see this video, the campaign is going to be in the final 48 hours, which is when things really start to heat up. In Kickstarter campaigns there is often a spike in backers at the 48-hour mark, but already there are over 4,900 backers who have unlocked almost 40 stretch goals with a retail value of €311. Throughout the campaign, backers have also been unlocking super stretch goals. These are huge rewards such as a gigantic airship and a tentacled sea monster. At the moment there are 7 super stretch goals with a retail value of €240 and the promise of even more to come. Anyone backing at the novice pledge level of €89 or higher gains access to all of the stretch goals, while anybody backing at the apprentice level of €148 or higher gains access to the stretch goals and super stretch goals. And if you want to know more, the best thing to do is click the link in the video description below to read through the campaign while you have the chance. With a core set comprising 99 models, a massive selection of add-ons, plus the stretch goals and super stretch goals, when you back this campaign you can be certain you are going to be getting a lot of really cool varied miniatures of excellent quality. They will range from huge monsters perfect for a final confrontation with your heroes, to smaller creatures for bizarre encounters in the wilderness or for populating your taverns. That being the case, I thought it would be fun to rummage through my sprues of Dungeons & Lasers miniatures from the previous Encounters crowdfunding campaign and paint up a few interesting things to create a hypothetical scenario. As I picked up the Swamps of Doom set, I've decided my little scenario is going to be in a swamp, but first the heroes must escape the spider-infested forests. The stretch goals from the Encounters campaign had some cool spider eggs, and I wanted to have a go at making them look suitably gross. First I need to get them out of the frames. All Archon Studio miniatures come on frames like this, and a lot of them will require assembly, although that assembly is often very easy. To get the parts out of the frame, never try to twist or pop them. We need to use some side cutters like these. These are fancy ones from Citadel, but any side cutters from your local hobby store are just fine. And what you want to do is locate the components you need, get the side cutters nice and close to the miniatures using the flat side, and then you carefully snip them out. Once you've removed them, you may have some mould lines or nubs that need cleaning off. You can cut or scrape these away using a trusty craft knife or one of these little thingies, a mould line remover. You just place the tool against the mould line, angle it slightly and drag it along. If you are cutting off nubs from where the miniatures were attached to the frame using a knife, never cut towards yourself, you will slice your thumbs or worse. Once you have your parts free from their sprues, you need to glue them together. You can use super glue for this. If you do, I recommend the runnier glue with a precision applicator. However, for hard plastic miniatures, I think the best thing to get is plastic glue, which actually melts the plastic and can help to seal small gaps in the miniatures while creating an incredibly strong bond. This plastic glue is from Citadel, but there are other brands like Revel which are just as good. Dry fit the pieces first so you know how they go together, and then apply the glue where the parts meet and press them in place. The plastic glue will hold firm almost immediately, but make sure it's completely dry before moving on to the fun bit, painting. And for this video I'm going to be painting a lot of different things using different approaches. First I have this little spider's nest, which was a single piece miniature I've mounted on a plain 25mm round base. I've spray undercoated it with Army Painter matte white, and I'm going to paint it in a few seconds using Army Painter Speedpaints, which are designed to instantly shade and highlight a miniature with a single application. I'm going to use just 3 colours: Pallid Bone, Holy White and Grim Black. First I am using Pallid Bone and I'm going to apply that to the skull. Without even waiting for that to dry, I am painting all of the spiders with Grim Black. Finally, I'm going to paint all of the webbing with Holy White. Just to finish it off and make it look neat, I will apply a coat of Steel Legion Drab to the edge of the base. And that's done. If you want, you can do a little dry brush to help bring out the details of the spiders. After filming this, I decided to do a very light dusting of Dawnstone from the Citadel paint range, and I think that really helped to define the little details. Always remember, a miniature is only done when you say it's done. You can always go back and do more later if you feel like it. Next we are going to have a go at those spider eggs. For this we are going to use Citadel shades and a little dry brushing. First I'm going to use Coelia Green, Drakenhof Nightshade and Athonian Camo Shade. And all I'm going to do with these shades is apply them in a haphazard random sort of way all over the egg sacs, splodging it on without much thought or care. just making sure we cover all of the bulbous part of the miniature. And you can use other colours if you want, anything that you think is going to look gribbly and gross. Then I'm going to use some good old Nuln oil to shade and provide definition for the strands of webbing supporting the egg. When all of those shades are dry, I'm going to apply a dry brush of pallid witch flesh over the whole miniature. You could use white for this, but witch flesh is a fleshy off-white, which I think gives the webbing a slightly more natural look, like it's something that has been secreted from a living thing. And that's done! I told you we'd be moving through these things quickly. Next we need something nasty to live in our swamp. I have some snakes, including a rather lovely giant serpent, but I really want to paint up the crabs that came with the encounter stretch goals, this king crab in particular. I'm using speed paints for this, mainly because I know that hardened leather does a really nice job on carapaces, and I think it will look awesome on this crab. So I have started with a spray undercoat of army painter matte white, and then I'm going to apply a coat of hardened leather over all of the carapace, trying to avoid as much as possible the larger barnacles, coral, seaweed and other bits and bobs. I have found that when working with speed paints, especially on large areas like this, the trick is to move quickly and trust the paint. If you keep going back to areas you have already painted to do touch-ups or apply more paint, you can start to drag the paint, leaving blotches and smears. Just apply the one coat and focus on being neat, and as much as possible, try not to overwork the paint. Next I'm going to use some Gravelord Grey. This is going to go on the large barnacles, being careful not to let it run over the hardened leather. You can also put little dabs of the grey on the tops of the smaller barnacles that were painted in leather. It just adds to the colour variance and helps to break up that solid mass of brown colour. Also, we are painting inside the mouth. Next I'm going to use Crusader Skin because you may not have noticed, but there's a little human hand and foot peeping out of the crab's claw. How nice. So we want that to be fleshy. We will also paint the tongue with this colour. Next is Dark Wood. This is a nice rich brown that we are going to use on all of the ropes and netting on the crab's back. Again, we want to work quickly and neatly here and trust the paint to do its work. Then we are using Malignant Green, which is a sort of pussy greenish yellow. Think Nurgle's Rot, but for speed paints. I'm going to use this to paint all over the seaweed and the wiggly bits. You could use a darker green or even a brown for this if you prefer. Next is Pallid Bone. This is just for the little spiky teeth to finish off the mouth. Nice and quick, one splodge and we're moving on. At this point I mounted the miniature on a base I had already painted. However, I subsequently decided I didn't like that base which I had painted with speed paints, so I removed the miniature carefully and repainted the base using the same techniques I used for the swamplands in my previous World of Deuslair video. I was much happier with them the second time around. Anyway, back to the crab. I used some Abaddon Black to paint in the beady little eyes, and while that black was drying I switched to this spectacular magic blue. I painted some of the coral with this so it would look really bright and vibrant. I then switched to blood red and used this on the remainder of the coral. There is a thing on the crab's back which is quite tall and straight, and I'm not sure if that was supposed to be coral or not, but I've painted it red anyway. Finally, I'm using a little pallid witch flesh to put a reflective dot in the black eyes. Doing this really helps to bring a miniature to life, adding so much character to the piece. And that is it. The two little baby crabs were just done with hardened leather for the bodies, and then Abaddon Black and pallid witch flesh for the eyes. They took about a minute each, not including the time it took to paint up the scenic bases. And we still aren't done. The Swamps of Doom set came with some nice piers, and I wanted to get those table ready too. We're going to do a quick dry brush and wash job on these, which is a common fallback I use for terrain. I had run out of black primer at this point, so I sprayed them with matte white and then I thinned down some dryad bark and painted it over all of the pier sections, making sure I got into all of the recesses. Once that was dry, I did an overbrush of Steel Legion Drab, which is a bit like a dry brush but with more paint on the brush. It covers large areas quickly while avoiding the recesses, so you can get a quick paint job done with good definition. Next I switched to Agrax Earthshade and I washed all of the piers with it, again making sure I got into all of the recesses. The good thing about painting a lot of terrain pieces like this is by the time you've painted the last one, the first one should be dry and ready for the next coat, which in this case is Zandri Dust. We're going to do a dry brush of this just on the tops and sides. Then I'm going to switch to Screaming Skull to dry brush any little shells or details on the top of the piers. This isn't really necessary, but it does break up the large expanse of brown a bit more. Finally, we have another optional step. I'm going to get some Athonian Camo Shade and I'm going to apply this around the bottom of the legs, in recesses between the boards and in little puddles on the lower slats. When this is dry you will hardly notice it, but it just adds a little colour variation and adds to that sense of piers that are in a fetid swamp. And that is done. This was very quick and easy, but I do just want to show you this boat. This was also from the Encounters set. I spray undercoated it white and then applied a single coat of Army Painter Dark Wood. It took about 2 minutes to cover the whole miniature and it looks absolutely fine. It's not quite as nice as the piers, but from a distance you probably wouldn't even notice the difference. For large pieces that are predominantly one colour, it's hard to go wrong with speed paint sometimes. And that is why I also used speed paints on this strange statue. I sprayed it white and applied a single coat of Gravelord Grey. I much prefer painting stone with a base coat wash and dry brush, but it's hard to complain when you can paint a sizable piece like this in the time it takes to boil the kettle for your next cup of tea. But I do want to make this statue a bit more interesting, so I'm going to add some moss. I've got some basing glue, basically PVA with a narrow applicator, and some flock scatter. And yes, I do still use this stuff to base miniatures sometimes. I'm old school. For this, I'm just going to run a little glue along the edges of the statue, and then I'm going to pour on some scatter. Once the glue is dry, you shake off any excess and save it for using another time, and there you go. Just a little something to make the piece feel more grounded and real. As I already painted up the Swamplands terrain for my previous World of Deuslair video, I now have almost everything I need. But no swamp encounter is truly complete without a bullywug, one of my favourite D&D creatures, and there's a really nice one here. Actually one of my favourite miniatures from the Encounters campaign. Up until now I've been doing really quick paint jobs, trying to find the fastest way possible to get things done, but for this little chap I'm going to take a little more time and care. We are still only doing tabletop quality, but we are going to do what I would call a proper paint job. To that end I have started with a spray undercoat of Army Painter Matte Black, and then I am going to paint all of the skin with Deathguard Green. I'm thinning the paint slightly so we don't clag up any of the details, and I'm going to apply 2 coats. That will give us a nice smooth base to work from. When it's completely dry, we are going to apply some Athonian Camo Shade. 1 coat of this all over the skin. You will notice at the moment I'm not being careful about getting the paint on surrounding areas. Now we are nowhere near finished on that skin. We are going to pay extra attention to it because there is so much of it. But first I want to get the other base colours down, so I'm switching to Leather Brown from Army Painter. Any brown will do really. And I'm going to paint the Bullywug's bedroll, the cords around his arms, and the rope he is wearing as a belt. All of those brown areas are going to get a coat of Agrax Earthshade to help bring out all the details. Then I'm switching to Zandri Dust and I'm going to paint this on his little loincloth, the banding on his spear, and the cord of his necklace. Some of these details are quite fine, so we just need to make sure we have a good point on our brush and take our time with it. Once the Zandri Dust is on, we are going to shade it with Reikland Flesh Shade. You could use Agrax Earthshade, but I want to give the cloth more of a tanned leather look, and Reikland will be a bit more subtle. We now have all of our base colours on the Bullywug, so we can go back to do the highlights. First we get our Deathguard Green, we thin it down and we apply it to just the raised parts of the skin. This is going to help bring out all the details and add more depth to the miniature. I'm keeping the paint really thin, almost a glaze, and I will apply a couple of coats. Then I am switching to Ogrin Camo, and again I am thinning it right down, and then we are going to use this to build up the colour on the raised area of the skin. I ended up doing 3 coats before I was really happy, but do more or less as you see fit. Next I am going back to Leather Brown, thinning it slightly and painting it on the flat surfaces and raised areas of the bedroll, and all of the little cords and strings. Then for an extra layer of definition, I'm going to thin some Monster Brown and do the same thing, but focusing more on the raised areas. Next is Zandri Dust, and again I am thinning this right down to a glazed consistency, and I'm going to paint on the raised areas. I did 2 coats, but again it's really a case of stopping when you are happy with the results. Just make sure you don't start overpainting your recess shading. We are almost there now, but we have to do some small details, so I'm thinning down a little white scar and I'm going to paint this on the eyes. I'm also going to paint it on the little gemstone the Bullywug is wearing around his neck. When that's dry, I'm going to use Cassandora Yellow and I'm going to apply it to the white scar to give it a coloured tint, and while that's drying I might as well grab my Mournfang Brown and put a solid coat of this over the tree stump, scenic base and the shaft of the spear. Next I'm going to thin down some Abaddon Black, and I'm going to very carefully paint a horizontal line in each eye. I'm also going to paint the tip of the spear because I want it to look like a piece of onyx or obsidian, something like that. Then it's back to Agrax Earthshade to apply a wash to the scenic base, one heavy coat, just making sure we don't go over the loincloth or feet, and then while that's drying we can do a little trick on the Bullywug's eyes that will really bring a lot of character and charm to the miniature. I'm thinning down some pallid witch flesh, but not too much, I don't want it to run everywhere, and then I'm going to take a brush with a fine point and I'm just going to dot the witch flesh in the top of the eye near the middle of the black line. I will also put a dot on the gem on the necklace, and that really simple trick completely transforms the look of the miniature. Next I'm going to get some Incubi Darkness and I'm going to use this to edge highlight the spear tip. You don't need to go crazy with this, just a little using a thin brush and thin paint. You won't really notice it on the tabletop, but it does make a difference. After you have matte varnished the miniature at the end, you could even go back and paint on a little gloss varnish to make it shiny if you feel the urge. But with that done, our Bullywug is basically complete, we just need to deal with the base. For that I used Auric Flesh on the greenery, followed by a Thonian camo shade and then a second coat of Auric Flesh as a highlight. For the tree stump I highlighted the raised areas using thin Steel Legion Drab. I also used Steel Legion Drab for the stones, followed by a highlight with thin Xandri Dust. Finally, Steel Legion Drab went around the base. And we are done. I'm very happy with that, one miniature painted, zero dry brushing, and this little chap is ready to dive into my scenario. Speaking of which, the heroes emerge from the depths of the forest, where the gnarled and twisted trees, poisoned to their very roots, are haunted by eight-limbed scuttling monstrosities. But there is no time to rest, not here on the banks of the swamp where the air is thick and cloying, ripe with the stench of decay. They must press on, for time is now a greater enemy than any insidious slithering creature the bubbling, fetid waters may conceal. One of their number stumbles, losing their balance and collapsing in a shuddering heap. The venom in their blood, the result of countless spider bites, is close to completing its deadly work. They breathe raggedly, each gasp an agony beyond imagination. There is no way they can survive a long march through the swamps, but ahead is a pier and an abandoned vessel, large enough for the stricken adventurer to lie within while their allies forge a path through the stinking slime. It's a desperate plan, and as soon as the adventurers enter the swamp, bubbles on the surface break and the still waters become agitated as crabs emerge from their muddy hiding places. One gigantic beast rises up, its disgusting bulk towering over the stricken heroes as its teeth chatter hungrily and its pulverizing claw snaps. This fight will test them to their limits. Should they survive, the elder Bullywug at the heart of the swamp may be able to provide the cure they need to save their friend. But who will save them? And that is it from me for today. Thank you to Archon Studio for sponsoring this video. Do remember, the campaign for World of Deuslair is in the 48-hour period. You can find a link in the video description below to head over to the campaign and check it out for yourself. There is plenty there to spark a Dungeon Master's imagination. Thank you so much for watching. If you have enjoyed the video, please consider pressing the like button. If you really enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing if you don't already do so. And hopefully, I'll see you all again very soon. Bye bye everyone. Bye bye.